today we're going to be talking about what-if analysis. But before that, I want to go ahead and kick it off with a little bit about myself. So I am a technical program manager here on the carbon product team within the Cloud for Sustainability, and I mainly lead the development of our AI tools within Microsoft Sustainability Manager. I encourage folks to ask questions throughout the session that we'll take at the end on both the topic being discussed today, as well as other AI concepts within Microsoft Sustainability Manager, if you happen to have questions in those areas. Let's go over the agenda for today's session. So the first thing we're going to do together is we'll go through an overview of the what-if analysis feature. After that, we'll step into Microsoft Sustainability Manager and go through really a demo and a deep dive of the different ways and the different scenarios that you can create with what-if analysis. Finally, we're going to go back into our deck here and talk about the list of supported scenarios. So we'll go through each of them, talk about the customizability and extensibility aspect, and then finally we'll close out our session today with some Q&A towards the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So what-if analysis is a custom AI-powered forecasting tool that we developed and tailored to the carbon data model within MSM. What-if analysis went into public preview within Microsoft Sustainability Manager in April, so just a few weeks ago now. It has 15 customizable scenarios across scopes 1, 2, and 3 that you can fine-tune or kind of customize to your organization's unique needs. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do this once we get into our demo. After this, we also want to talk a little bit about the different types of changes that you can simulate. So we have product, material, quantity, things like distance changes, etc., that you can simulate within the what-if analysis forecasting scenarios. So with this, you're able to really align scenarios to things like switching to a new supplier, changing aspects of your transportation and distribution, going to renewable energy, things of that nature, just to give a few examples. And then finally, we do have an adaptable forecasting technology. And what I mean by this is that what-if analysis uses ARIMA and ATS time series forecasting models, but in combination with that, we also have custom data handling to generate high confidence forecasts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that data handling once we go into our demo. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. So let me just very quickly switch us over into the product here. So hopefully now everyone is able to see my screen. We are within Microsoft Sustainability Manager now. So the way that we're going to lead this demo, I'm first going to go through an example of how to set up a what-if analysis scenario and run it. And then we're going to go through some scenarios that have already been run and have results, just so that folks can get a sense of what those results would look like. And we can talk a little bit about some of the graphs and what they mean. So the first step to using what-if analysis is creating your forecasting scenario. So you can choose a name. Let's say we want to simulate upstream transportation and distribution. We want to switch from rail. And then here is where you choose your data type. So data type is really just a synonym for, the scope 1, 2, or 3 category that you would like this particular scenario to be based off of. For the one that I've chosen here, we've gone with upstream transportation and distribution. You'll see that when you select a data type, it changes the fields that you see below. So organizational unit facility will always stay, but the fields below it will be tailored to that particular scenario. And from there, you're able to customize the inputs for it. So for this one, let's say we wanted to take a look at maybe Contoso APAC for our organizational unit for our upstream transportation and distribution. Now we can choose the transportation mode that we historically have used for this organizational unit. Looks like rail is the one that I had looked at here. And then we'll also want to choose a transportation mode that we would like to forecast for. So for this one, let's do maybe medium and heavy duty trucks. Again, these scenarios are not meant to be incredibly realistic. I would just like to show the process of creating it. So we're switching from rail to medium and heavy duty trucks. Both are a shared load. And then here you have this concept of quantity changes. So some scenarios or some data types you'll notice do give you the option to make these quantity and percentage changes. So let's say for this one, the change from rail to heavy duty truck resulted in maybe like a 20% increase in distance traveled. And maybe now you can carry maybe like 10% more in the goods quantity on average. Finally, you have the ability to customize your calculation model here. So let's say for a particular scenario, you need to use a calculation model that is not one of the out-of-the-box ones that we provide here. You're able to select whichever one you would like that fits your particular scenario. And then finally, you get to choose an assessment report version within the product. We currently support assessment reports 4, 5, and 6. After you've done this, you save your scenario, and then you have 2 ways to initiate it. You can initiate it through this button here while you've got the side panel open, or you'll see that it's now in this drop down. So if you select it, you can also run it here. So now let's take a look at some scenarios that I've already run ahead of time to give us a sense of what the results really look like. So let's take a look at this first one here. For this first scenario that we're looking at, it looks like this is a mobile combustion scenario where we're switching from light-duty trucks that run on ethanol to light-duty trucks that run on compressed natural gas. And we've got our results here where our blue line to the left of this axis is our historical data. And this graph is completely, you can interact with this graph in a couple different ways. So we can remove the historical line, and now we can focus on these 2 forecast lines that we see here. So these 2 forecast lines, we have this concept of what we call a current strategy, and then we have this concept of a new strategy. So with current strategy, that is the next 6 months or the next 6 data points if you were to continue using, in this case, light-duty trucks that run on ethanol. If we hide the current strategy and its prediction interval, which we'll talk about in a moment, we can see our new strategy. So our new strategy, again, in this case, is what would happen over the course of the next 6 months, or what is forecasted to happen if you were to switch to light-duty trucks using compressed natural gas, again, for Contoso Pod business. Now, we see here, if I hide the line for just a moment, we have this almost shaded area, and this is what we call a prediction interval. So you'll have this for both your current strategy as well as your new strategy. So prediction intervals really give you a sense of the potential range of values that a particular forecast point may fall between, with about a 95% confidence interval. So for the first point here, it looks like we've got a low of about 0.3 metric tons of CO2e and a high of 3.34 metric tons of CO2e. And then as you move forward, you've got your highs and your lows. They will never go below 0, so sometimes your low will be at 0. And we can see that for the current strategy, we've got the same. So I'll bring everything back into view here, and we can really take it all into account. At the very top of the page here, you've got one more thing, and that's really your cumulative sum of the forecast or the projected emissions for both your current strategy as well as your new strategy. So taking a look at these numbers here, it looks like our new strategy, while not by much, is projected to be an improvement from the current strategy. Let's take a look at another scenario here. So for this scenario, we're looking at employee commuting, and it looks like we're trying to simulate what it would look like if employees assigned to the organizational unit Contoso USA started commuting, so still using passenger car, but are now commuting at an increased percentage, so about 34% more. And again, Contoso USA. So this is our historical data here. Looks like we very much kind of trend around the same area. We saw some increases starting in January of 2022, maybe a return to office policy there. And then we can see what would happen if they continued commuting to the same office versus or series of offices, or if they started commuting to that further away office. Again, not a very large change here emissions-wise, but still valuable to see. I want to talk a little bit about the projection forward. So you may have heard me mention earlier that you'll see the next 6 months out or 6 data points. So what I mean by this is that if your historical data is spaced more infrequently frequently than every month. So let's say you have quarterly data for that particular data source, then your forecast forward would show you 6 points at that same interval. So instead of 6 months, if your data is spaced month to month like the data here is, you would have the next 6 quarters of data. So we generate 6 data points forward, again, at the spacing that your data is. Let's take a look at one last scenario here together. So for this last one, we have end-of-life treatment of sold products. And this is our first one where we've really got a very drastic change that's going to be caused by the switch that we're making. So for this one, again, end-of-life treatment of sold products, we're looking at Contoso APAC as our business unit, as our organizational unit here. And you can drill down further than just organizational unit. And notice that all the examples I have here are just organizational unit, but you can also choose a facility that you want to drill down to. So for scope 2, that can be incredibly helpful if you're doing things like renewable energy, or if you just want to really single out something that's going to happen at a particular facility, you can definitely do that as well. So for this one, we chose organizational unit. So it looks like here we're switching the way that we are disposing of our mixed plastics. So we're going to go from combusting the mixed plastics to recycling the mixed plastics. I think the results here, again, relatively straightforward. We've got some historical data here, and if we maintain with the combustion of those mixed plastics, we see very similar emissions moving forward. However, if we go over to combusting it, we can see that let me maybe hide the historical data, we can see that very strong decline in emissions, even just with the first forecast point here. So moving us forward now, I'm actually going to bring us back into the PowerPoint. Just one moment here. Perfect. And the next thing we're going to go through is the full list of supported scenarios that we have here for our initial release. So with our initial release, as I mentioned earlier, we have 15 scenarios that are supported within the product. And so we have scenarios across scopes 1, 2, and 3, but you'll notice that some scenarios or some data types within those 3 scopes are not present. So our goal for this first iteration is really to target the high value scenarios and allow a good amount of customizability and tailoring to your particular data. So here in black bold are any change fields that in the background are emission factor changes. So anything industrial process type, vehicle type in the background, those are mapped to factors and cause emission factor changes during the calculation stage. Anything that's in green, those are your quantity changes, your numeric column changes. So you'll see that we have some spread across scopes 1 and 3 there. The intention behind this is, of course, to expand. So we are currently in the stage of our public preview where we are taking feedback on what scenarios are working, where we need, obviously, additional flexibility for the scenarios based on the type of data that's coming in, etc. So with that in mind, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit about a related session that we had earlier in the week. So as Kelsey mentioned, this is our very last session for the Tech Summit today. However, we did have a really wonderful session on saving time with Copilot earlier in the week. So if you found the content for today's session interesting, I highly, highly recommend that you go back and watch Tuesday's session in addition to other sessions of interest if you haven't already. Now, let's very briefly go over a couple of helpful links related to this session. So you've likely seen the first link quite a few times, but now that we are at the very, very end of our Tech Summit, we would really appreciate that you share your feedback with us on how this Tech Summit went, what things you enjoyed, what things maybe didn't work as well, etc. Next, we've got our documentation for what-if analysis. I will definitely put a link to this documentation in the chat as well, so folks have access to it. And then finally, some very common links here. We have access to our sustainability community. This is where you can really connect with other organizations who have similar goals, in achieving their sustainability journeys, and ask questions related to our product ecosystem within Cloud for Sustainability. And then lastly, we've got some learning resources if you'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the content that you've seen during these sessions.